Is cannabis really just a tool for escaping reality, or could it actually be a sacred plant with profound spiritual significance? This is a question very few dare to confront seriously. In today's world, cannabis is often tied to the image of misuse, a way to numb the pressures of life, to temporarily forget the harshness of reality. But if we dig deeper into history, into the ancient archives of spiritual wisdom, especially the lost fragments of Thoth's knowledge, the picture of this plant may look entirely different. Many ancient civilizations believed that plants were not only sources of physical sustenance, but also bridges connecting humans to higher realms of energy. Cannabis, with its unique structure and ability to alter consciousness, may once have been used as a key to unlock spiritual activation gates, a tool to connect with the deepest layers of the self and the spiritual dimensions most of us have long forgotten. The problem is, most people are using it the wrong way. Instead of serving as a tool for expanded awareness, it has been turned into a temporary sedative for the mind. So where exactly is the line between a spiritual sleeping pill and a doorway to awakening? In this video, we'll decode that mystery, uncovering the traces left behind in Thoth's teachings and exploring whether cannabis can truly act as a tool for spiritual activation, or if it's nothing more than a repeated illusion. Are you ready to pull back the veil and see the truth for yourself? They told you weed was for chilling out, for giggles and munchies, and turning your brain off. But what if I told you that every time you lit up, you weren't escaping reality? You were stepping into it, and you didn't even know it. You weren't getting high. You were getting hijacked, not by the plant, but by your own misunderstanding of it. Because this sacred plant wasn't given to us to numb the pain. It was given to dissolve illusion. And what you've been taught to call a high was only the echo of something far more ancient, activation. Before it was called weed, before it was turned into memes, laws, dispensaries, and rolling papers, it was known by a different name, Vijaya. In Sanskrit, it meant the conqueror of suffering. That's not stoner talk, that's sacred language. This plant wasn't passed around a circle to kill time. It was offered to the gods, to the spirit, to the part of you that knows there's more to this life than jobs, deadlines, and dopamine hits. The ancients didn't stumble onto cannabis, they revered it. In India, sadhus took it to still the mind before entering deep samadhi. In Egypt, it was burned in sacred rituals by priests, seeking communion with Thoth, the god of wisdom. It appears in hieroglyphs, not as a drug, but as a divine conductor. The Bible hints at cannabism, translated loosely as fragrant cane, now believed by many scholars to be cannabis, used in anointing oils during sacred rites. So how did we lose this? How did we go from sacred smoke to TikTok stoner jokes? Somewhere along the way, the sacred was stripped, and the superficial was sold in its place. Colonial empires criminalized it. Modern medicine dismissed it, and culture rebranded it as a lazy escape. But behind all that noise, the real story remained buried until now. See, cannabis was never meant to be entertainment. It was a tool for awakening, a catalyst, a key. And here's the twist. Modern science is finally catching up. UCLA researchers found that cannabis increases blood flow to the frontal cortex, the very area associated with self-reflection and spirituality. Johns Hopkins has linked THC to altered states that mirror deep meditation. Brain scans show elevated alpha and gamma wave activity during cannabis use, the exact same frequencies found in Tibetan monks during deep states of bliss and clarity. This isn't a theory. It's measurable. It's happening, and it means that everything the mystics claimed thousands of years ago was real. But here's what most people miss. Intention changes everything. When you approach the plant with reverence, it opens a different door. It doesn't pull you out of your life. It pulls you deeper into it. But when you treat it casually, mindlessly, or worse, habitually, it becomes a fog. not a flame. It doesn't open your mind. It wraps it in cotton. And that's where most of us are stuck, numbing out instead of waking up. Because if you've ever felt like cannabis was showing you something, some glimpse, some truth, some version of you that's more awake, you weren't imagining it. You were tapping into something ancient, something designed. But like any spiritual tool, it demands respect. That's the difference between being high and being hijacked. The ancients didn't use cannabis to escape. They used it to face reality raw, unfiltered, and divine. And that's what this is about, reclaiming the path. You've been told the plant makes you slow, forgetful, lazy. But what if it's not the plant that dulls you, but how you're using it? Without intention, cannabis reflects your confusion. With intention, it reveals your clarity. That's the truth buried under decades of misinformation. And once you see it, you can't go back. If cannabis was once known as the conqueror of suffering, then the way we use it today might be the very thing keeping us in suffering, not because of what the plant does, but because of what we've forgotten. It's time to remember. The truth is, cannabis doesn't change you. It reveals you. It lifts the veil. But what you see when the veil lifts depends entirely on the space you're in mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and most people, they're not in a sacred space. They're in survival mode. They're overstimulated, disconnected, and desperate for a moment of peace. So when they light up, they're not stepping into higher consciousness. They're sinking into distraction. The plant doesn't fail them. They fail to approach it with purpose. And in that, they strip it of its ancient power. The mystics of old didn't casually consume. They prepared, fasting, chanting, silence, intention. Cannabis was a ceremony, not a pastime. It wasn't used to dull pain. It was used to enter pain, explore it, understand it, and ultimately transcend it. The plant wasn't an escape hatch. It was a mirror. And like any mirror, it can reflect two things, your truth or your illusion. Which one it shows depends on how you enter the space. Most people today smoke out of habit, out of boredom, out of craving. But cannabis, in its highest form, demands the opposite, presence. It doesn't serve the mindless. It serves the mindful. If you approach it like junk food, it will give you junk visions. If you approach it like sacred medicine, it will give you sacred insight. This isn't esoteric fantasy, it's neuroscience. THC alters neural pathways, enhances introspection, and stimulates the same regions activated during spiritual experience. But without inner stillness, without discipline, those same circuits become overwhelmed, lost in loops of thought, distraction, or anxiety. It's like being handed a telescope and using it to stare at your phone. The tool has infinite potential, but the direction you point, it defines the outcome. And this is where most people get stuck. They smoke to forget instead of to remember. They use it to tune out rather than tune in. And over time, the magic fades not because the plant has changed, but because they never truly entered the temple it opens. Every spiritual tool has a shadow. Ayahuasca, mushrooms, breathwork. Cannabis is no exception. The shadow is what happens when power is accessed without preparation. It distorts, it confuses, it feeds the ego instead of dissolving it. And for many, weed becomes a coping mechanism rather than a catalyst. They start needing it to feel normal, chasing the feeling of connection without doing the inner work that connection requires. And slowly, it becomes a crutch, a trap, a mask, all while still carrying the illusion that it's spiritual. But here's the deeper truth. Cannabis amplifies your current vibration. It doesn't replace your inner state, it intensifies it. So if you're anxious, it may magnify that anxiety. If you're grounded, it may deepen your peace. It's not here to fix you. It's here to show you. And the question is, are you ready to see what it reveals? This is why intention matters more than dosage. Ritual matters more than frequency. The ancients knew this. They didn't use cannabis daily. They used it at sacred junctures, eclipses, equinoxes, initiations. The plant wasn't casual, it was cosmic. Its use was embedded in structure, in reverence, in alignment with higher forces. And when used that way, it became a key, not just to the mind, but to the soul. It revealed patterns, traumas, illusions. It opened channels between worlds, between timelines, between the self you think you are and the self you're becoming. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you used cannabis with full awareness? No phone, no TV, no music, just silence, breath, presence. When was the last time you treated the moment as sacred, not routine? For most, the answer is never, and that's not a judgment. That's the wake-up call. Cannabis isn't the problem. Disconnection is. The plant didn't lose its magic. We lost our memory of how to use it, and that memory? It's coming back. People are remembering. The ceremonies are being rebuilt. The ancient ways are being whispered again. And if you listen closely, you'll hear them too. This isn't about getting high. It's about getting free. The difference is everything. There's a reason some people feel anxious, paranoid, or exposed when they smoke cannabis. And it's not just the strain. It's because the plant is showing them something they've spent years avoiding. See, cannabis doesn't only open the door to inspiration and insight. It opens the basement. It shines a light into the corners of your subconscious where your fears, insecurities, and unhealed wounds hide. That uncomfortable feeling? That's your shadow waking up. And if you're not ready to face it, the experience can feel overwhelming. But that's not the plant punishing you. That's the medicine doing its work. The ancient mystics called cannabis a revealer, a bridge, not because it made you feel good, but because it showed you what needed to be felt. They used it to explore suffering, not escape it. Because on the other side of suffering is truth. But here's what no one tells you. The truth doesn't always feel good. It often feels raw, confronting, and messy. The ego wants control. Cannabis disrupts that control. It softens the armor. And if you've built your whole identity around avoiding discomfort, that softening feels like chaos. But the chaos is the point. What you feel when the high hits isn't random. It's revealing. Anxious thoughts? They were already there. Cannabis didn't create them. It surfaced them. Emotional tension? It's been in your body for years. The plant just removed the filters long enough for you to notice. And if you sit with what rises instead of running, you begin the real work. Integration, healing, transformation. Clinical therapists are finally catching up. Studies from Johns Hopkins and MAPS show cannabis-assisted therapy helping people process trauma, grief, and long-held emotional blockages not by numbing, but by opening. Cannabis, when paired with intention, journaling, breathwork, or movement, becomes a sacred lens, a psychic scalpel. And unlike other psychedelics, its door is always there. You can return again and again, gently as needed. But it takes courage, real courage, because most people want the insight without the mirror. They want to feel enlightened without doing the excavation. They want to be shown visions of love and clarity, but skip the layers of resentment, shame, or fear that have calcified over the years. That's why casual use so often plateaus. The plant keeps offering the door, and we keep walking past it. But those who choose to walk through, they start seeing something different. They notice how emotions shift, how the breath changes, how specific memories resurface with new clarity, how repetitive thoughts reveal hidden patterns. It's not just a mental trip. It's a rewiring, a restructuring of the nervous system, the energetic body, and the narrative you carry about who you are. Ancient yogis believed that cannabis could activate Kundalini energy, the dormant serpent of transformation that rests at the base of the spine. But they didn't smoke and scroll. They combined it with breath, stillness, and mantra. Why? because they understood that what the plant awakens must be moved. Stagnation becomes suffering. Movement becomes liberation. That anxiety you feel, it's energy begging to flow. When used consciously, cannabis becomes a compass. It shows you where you're blocked, where you've been lying to yourself, where you're holding pain that isn't even yours. It's not just a psychological mirror. It's an energetic one, and it's precise. You might notice your heart racing, not because you're paranoid, but because there's something your heart is trying to say. You might feel tension in your chest, not because of THC, but because you've buried grief so deep you forgot it was there. And when you finally allow yourself to sit in that discomfort, not to fix it, not to fight it, but to feel it, you begin to shift. You begin to heal. You begin to take your power back. This is what makes cannabis sacred, not because it gives you answers, but because it makes you ready to ask the real questions. Not because it creates peace, but because it clears the space for peace to emerge. In the old temples, discomfort was a sign of growth. Emotional resistance was a doorway. The shadow wasn't the enemy, it was the teacher. And the plant was the guide who led you through the storm, not around it. You weren't meant to avoid the shadow. You were meant to dance with it. The ritual begins when you stop running. When the ancients spoke of sight, they weren't talking about the eyes in your head. They were talking about the one between your brows, the third eye, the seat of inner knowing, intuition, and spiritual vision. In every mystical tradition, the center was revered as the gateway to higher consciousness. And cannabis wasn't a party drug. It was the key. Long before cannabis was criminalized or commodified, it was considered a sacred tool to awaken the pineal gland. In ancient Egypt, the Eye of Horus symbol wasn't just art. It was anatomy. The shape mirrors the human brain, highlighting the pineal gland's position deep in the center of the head. This wasn't a coincidence. The priesthood understood what most scientists are only now beginning to discover. The pineal gland is more than just an organ. It's a portal. Modern neuroimaging shows that THC increases blood flow to specific regions of the brain, especially those associated with introspection, empathy, and insight. It lights up the default mode network, the seat of your inner narrative, but it also quiets the ego, softening the linear, logical thinking that dominates your waking life. This shift makes room for symbols, archetypes, and intuitive understanding to emerge. And when used intentionally, cannabis doesn't just help you think, it helps you see. This is why mystics, shamans, and prophets across cultures, from Indian rishis to Amazonian curanderos, used cannabis as part of vision rituals. Not to hallucinate, not to escape, but to tune into frequencies they couldn't normally access. Dreams became clearer, symbols appeared with meaning. Answers to long-held questions would surface with crystal clarity. The plant didn't hand them truth. It helped them remember it. But modern use, we've reduced that key to cheap amusement. Blunt in hand, screen in face, dopamine on loop. And that's the tragedy, not because it's bad, but because it's incomplete. You're sitting at the doorway of spiritual activation. With a remote control in your hand, the signal is there. You're just tuned to the wrong channel. Ancient rituals knew how to tune in. They combined cannabis with chanting, fasting, sacred geometry, lunar cycles. Why? Because resonance matters. The plant amplifies energy, and the intention shapes what it amplifies. You bring in chaos, you get more chaos. You bring in reverence, and what it reveals can shake your very concept of reality. Pineal gland activation isn't a fantasy, it's physics. The gland is sensitive to light, frequency, and magnetic fields. Studies suggest it even contains piezoelectric crystals, which can convert pressure into electromagnetic signals. This means it responds to sound, vibration, and yes, plant medicine. When cannabis is used in alignment with these principles, it doesn't just get you high, it aligns you. But that alignment can feel jarring if you're carrying internal distortion. The plant doesn't numb you to it. It shows you exactly where you're out of tune. It exposes your emotional noise, your mental clutter, your spiritual resistance. It peels away the layers. And what's left is a kind of clarity that's hard to describe until you've felt it. Not just mental clarity, but energetic clarity that you see your patterns, you sense your blocks. And for the first time, you understand what's actually been holding you back. Not circumstances, not luck, but misalignment. And it's here, in this space, where real change begins. You're no longer navigating blindly. You start making decisions from a place beyond logic, decisions that just feel right. Conversations shift, synchronicities increase. Dreams become messages. You're not imagining it, you're finally tuned in. And cannabis was the antenna. But the question is, are you prepared for what it reveals? Because once you activate the inner eye, you can't close it again. You can't unsee the illusions. You can't pretend your distractions are fulfilling. You can't numb yourself the same way. The plant doesn't just change what you see, it changes how you see. And that shift is permanent. For those who have felt it, there's no going back. You begin to crave silence, depth, authenticity. You're no longer entertained by surface-level chatter or shallow pursuits. The veil has lifted, and what used to feel high now feels heavy. That's the paradox. Once you awaken, the old ways of using weed feel like a waste. You don't want the fog, you want the light. Because once the third eye opens, everything else begins to follow. You felt it before. You just didn't have the language for it. That subtle current moving through your body when you're deeply still. That strange electric buzz in your spine after a moment of intense truth. That warm surge in your chest when your mind finally shuts up and something deeper speaks. What you felt wasn't imagined. It was energy. In cannabis, when used with intention, doesn't dull that sensation, it amplifies it. In ancient traditions, this wasn't news. The sages of India called it prana. The Chinese called it ki. The Egyptians mapped it into their temples through sacred geometry. And all of them knew your body isn't just muscle and bone. It's a channel, a conductor, a bridge between dimensions. But in the modern world, you've been taught to ignore this dimension entirely. You feel anxious? It's all in your head. You feel drained? Drink more coffee. You feel disconnected? Scroll harder. The energetic body has been erased from your reality, even though it's the part of you that whispers the loudest when the noise dies down. Cannabis doesn't just affect the mind. It directly interacts with the nervous system. It increases heart rate variability, enhances parasympathetic activity, and modulates the vagus nerve. In plain terms, it helps you feel, and not just emotionally. It brings awareness to sensation, to breath, to inner movement. But here's what most people miss. Cannabis amplifies whatever you bring into it. If you're stressed, it'll echo that stress. If you're grounded, it'll deepen your grounding. The plant is a mirror, a magnifier. And if you use it to escape your feelings, it'll eventually amplify the very thing you're running from. The ancients used it differently. They paired cannabis with grounding rituals, breath work, fasting, movement, mantra. They didn't just ingest the plant. They invited it. They created a space of reverence, not routine. Why? Because they knew that a surge of energy without grounding can cause more chaos than clarity. Ever notice how an ungrounded high can spiral into anxiety, paranoia, or dissociation? That's not the plant betraying you. That's your body's energy system being overstimulated without support. The yogic texts speak of Nadi's 72,000 energetic pathways flowing through the human body. The Chinese medicine system maps meridians that connect organs, emotions, and states of consciousness. Modern research is catching up, showing increased electrical conductivity in acupuncture points during altered states. It's all pointing to the same truth. You're an electrical being, and cannabis, like a current, flows through you. But a current without direction? That's a short circuit. You need grounding, intention, structure. Otherwise, you're just flipping breakers in the dark, hoping for light. This is why ceremonial use is so powerful, because it's not about smoking more, it's about feeling more. The breath slows, the body relaxes, the subtle movements within you, the twitch in your gut, the ache behind your heart, the fire in your spine begin to speak. And if you listen long enough, those sensations become signals. They point to memories, to wounds, to blockages that have been living rent-free in your system for years. And suddenly, you're not just high, you're healing. But here's the thing. This kind of energetic sensitivity can be uncomfortable. We're conditioned to avoid discomfort, to fix it, medicate it, distract from it. But discomfort is the doorway. Because what's uncomfortable isn't the plant, it's the truth. It reveals truth about your habits, your coping mechanisms, the places where your soul has been whispering, and you've been pretending not to hear. In a ceremony, with the right intention, cannabis becomes an amplifier of that inner voice. It helps you feel into the answers rather than think your way toward them. And the most profound thing? It teaches you to trust your body again. Because your body isn't lying to you, it never has. You were just never taught how to listen, and in that deep listening, something wild happens. Your body begins to move itself. You stretch without thinking. You breathe in a rhythm that's not yours, but feels ancient. Emotions rise without context and fall like waves. You're not performing. You're releasing trauma, tension, stories that have been locked in your tissues since childhood begin to let go, not because the plant is magic, but because you finally got still enough to hear what needed to be felt. This is what the ancients meant when they said cannabis is a sacred plant, not because it makes you float, but because it makes you drop into your body, into your breath, into the invisible world that's been speaking to you your whole life. You just needed the right frequency to tune in, and you needed the courage to feel what came through. Cannabis, used in this way, doesn't just relax the body, it recalibrates it. It reminds you that your body is not a cage. It's a compass. And when you follow that compass inward toward sensation, toward silence, toward stillness, that's when the healing begins. Deep beneath the sands of Egypt, hidden from the eyes of tourists and textbooks, lies a mystery that has yet to be fully understood. Not a myth, not a metaphor, but a method. A ritual that once brought the human mind to the edge of divinity. And at its core wasn't a pyramid or a pharaoh's tomb, it was cannabis. Burned, not smoked, sung into, not consumed in silence, combined with sacred geometry, lunar timing, and the resonance of specific frequencies. This ritual wasn't about getting high. It was about waking up. And the one who held its blueprint, Thoth, wasn't just a god of wisdom. He was the keeper of sacred technologies, the initiator of priests, the master of timing, the architect of consciousness. Known to the Greeks as Hermes Trismegistus, to mystics as the author of the Emerald Tablets, Thoth symbolized the bridge between the seen and the unseen. And the ritual that bears his fingerprints wasn't recreational, it was transformative. The ceremony took place during precise lunar phases, most commonly the full moon, when the Earth's energetic field is at its peak receptivity. Egyptian initiates would fast beforehand, not for deprivation, but to empty the body of distraction. The temple would be constructed in exact alignment with celestial markers, Orion's belt above, the Nile below. A specific mixture of resins, herbs, and cannabis was ground into a sacred paste, burned on hot coals. The scent alone was enough to trigger altered states. And when inhaled in rhythm with breath and chant, the participants didn't hallucinate, they remembered. Modern neuroscience is now confirming what the ancients hinted at. Cannabis, when paired with rhythmic sound and focused breath, can create what's known as long-term potentiation, a rewiring of the brain that strengthens new pathways of thought, insight, and emotion. What we call epiphanies, they experienced as realignment. And, unlike the fleeting highs of modern casual use, these shifts lasted. They didn't escape their reality. They restructured it. Inside these temples, chants were not just words, they were codes. Frequencies tuned to resonate with the body's energy centers, now understood in modern science as vibrational entrainment. Participants weren't just meditating. They were synchronizing their hearts, brains, and breath to access altered states. The cannabis didn't cause the shift, it opened the door to receive it. And what about sacred geometry? Every inch of those temples was mapped to harmonize with cosmic ratios, the golden mean, Fibonacci sequences. These weren't aesthetic choices, they were energetic conduits. The body responds to symmetry, and under the influence of cannabis, that sensitivity magnifies. Walk through a space built in perfect proportion while activated by the plant, and your body doesn't just feel calm, it resonates. Your inner and outer worlds sync. You don't worship geometry. You become it. Here's the part that's most important. This ritual was never meant to be exclusive. It wasn't reserved for elites. Thoth's teachings were encoded to survive corruption, passed down in symbols, glyphs, and myth. The wisdom was never lost, only hidden in plain sight. But without the key of intention, we've mistaken the map for the destination. We've used the plant, but forgotten the process. And in doing so, we've lost the transformation. Today, most cannabis use skips every single step of this. There's no breath, no rhythm, no alignment, just consumption in cars, in bedrooms, in stress. And we wonder why the experience feels duller each time, why the insights fade, why the joy doesn't last. It's not the plant, it's the absence of ritual. We've taken the sacred and made it casual. We've reduced a cosmic technology to a coping mechanism. But here's the thing, the ritual can be reclaimed. You don't need an Egyptian temple. You don't need a full moon. You need space, intention, breath, a willingness to go deeper than sensation and listen to what the plant is trying to show you. Because Thoth's true ritual was never about the setting, it was about the state of stillness, of receptivity, of awareness so sharp it cuts through illusion. That's the space where remembrance happens. That's where old traumas rise to be released, where hidden truths surface without shame, and where the ego finally steps aside to let the soul speak. In a world obsessed with stimulation, the original ritual was about reduction, silence over noise, presence over distraction, depth over intensity. And that's what makes it so dangerous to the system, because it wakes people up. And someone who's awake cannot be controlled. So no, this isn't some exotic myth buried in sand. It's a manual, a reminder, a wake-up call to those who have felt that there's more to the high, and there is. It's not about getting higher, it's about going deeper. And when done right, that depth doesn't fade with the smoke. It remains. Because what you accessed wasn't just a plant's power, it was your own. The goal was never the high. That was just the side effect. The real gift of cannabis, the one ancient mystics, yogis, and alchemists revered, was its ability to reveal not to add something to you, but to strip away what doesn't belong. When used with presence, this plant becomes a magnifying glass for the soul. It shows you where you're stuck, where you've been hiding, and most importantly, who you were before. The world told you who to be. But here's the truth no one's saying. Most people never get there because most people never listen. We've been taught to use cannabis like a painkiller. Feel stress, light up. Feel tired, spark one. Feel nothing, smoke to feel something. But every time we reach for it to avoid, we lose the invitation to explore. Numbing isn't healing. Escaping isn't awakening. And repeating the same ritual night after night without growth is spiritual stagnation disguised as self-care. It's not the plant's fault, it's the intention or the lack of it. When you use cannabis without direction, you enter a loop. It may feel euphoric at first, music sounds better, Time slows down, laughter comes easy, but then it fades. You chase the same feeling again, but now your tolerance is up, your insights feel duller, and the magic is gone. This isn't because the plant stopped working. It's because your spirit got bored. You can only circle the same surface so many times before your soul craves depth. Healing doesn't happen when you're hiding. It happens when you're present with what hurts. And this is where cannabis, used correctly, becomes unmatched. Because it doesn't just soothe the nervous system, it reveals the nervous system. You begin to notice what your body has been storing, emotions you've buried, memories you've suppressed, beliefs you never questioned, they surface. And in that moment, you're not high, you're honest. That's the real medicine, modern. Clinical studies are finally catching up to what sages always knew. Cannabis, when used intentionally, amplifies self-awareness and emotional processing. In therapeutic settings, it's accelerating breakthroughs in PTSD, addiction, and even deep-seated grief, not because it makes people forget, but because it helps them remember safely. Paired with tools like journaling, somatic breathwork, or guided inner journeys, cannabis becomes a catalyst for real transformation, not a bandage, a scalpel, a light. But this is where the split happens, because awakening is not always comfortable. Cannabis doesn't show you what you want to see. It shows you what you need to see. That's why some people feel paranoid, anxious, or disoriented when they use it. It's not because the plant betrayed them, it's because something inside them is resisting the truth being revealed. The problem isn't the discomfort. The problem is our relationship to it. When discomfort arises, most people run. But what if you stayed? What if instead of numbing, you breathed? What if you wrote down the thoughts that scared you and asked where they came from? What if you moved your body and let the energy pass through instead of locking it in? That's how trauma dissolves. That's how programming unravels. That's how healing begins, not in avoidance, but in awareness. This plant has always been a mirror. It reflects your vibration, your thoughts, your frequency. So if you approach it with fear, it magnifies that. But if you approach it with reverence, it magnifies your capacity to feel, to understand, to change. One intentional session, held with awareness and presence, can offer more insight than months of distracted consumption. Because when you stop using cannabis to check out, you start using it to check in. And here's the shift no one sees coming. When you begin to use cannabis as a tool for healing, you'll find you need it less. Because the insights don't fade. The breakthroughs don't dissolve. You integrate, you evolve. And that's the irony. Cannabis, used with sacred intent, doesn't make you dependent, it makes you sovereign. It reminds you that you were never broken, just disconnected. And the high? It was just a hint of what it feels like to be aligned. You don't need to smoke more to go deeper. You need to go inward. Because the future of cannabis isn't more frequency, it's more intention. It's not about the strain or the THC percentage or the gear you use. It's about the why. Why are you lighting up? What are you seeking? What are you willing to face? That's the difference between a high and a healing, between a loop and a breakthrough. The next time you reach for the plant, pause. Create space, light a candle, breathe, set an intention. Then watch what happens not just to your mind, but to your soul. Because this isn't about getting lost in smoke. It's about rising through it. And once you realize that, you'll never use weed the same way again. You won't be getting high, you'll be coming home. You were never meant to stay lost in the haze. The real journey of cannabis was always about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And if you're listening to this now, maybe you've already felt it, that quiet knowing deep inside that the path you're on doesn't align with who you really are. You've chased the so-called dream, the job title, the apartment, the curated life, and yet something still feels off. That's not failure. That's the signal. The call to redefine success, not by how well you fit into a broken system, but by how true you're willing to be to your soul. Cannabis, when used consciously, has the power to strip away the masks. It shows you the parts of yourself you've hidden just to survive. It reflects the roles you've played: the obedient student, the productive worker, the agreeable friend. And it asks the question, are you in there? Or just fragments of what society shaped? The uncomfortable truth is, most people never stop to ask. They measure their worth by external approval, a promotion, a relationship, a number on a screen. But when the high fades and the room gets quiet, the emptiness creeps in. Because success without alignment isn't success at all, it's spiritual. Starvation in disguise. The ancient initiates who worked with sacred plants knew this well. True transformation wasn't measured by how high you could get. It was measured by how deep you could go. The inner journey was the real currency. Self-knowledge, integrity, wisdom, these were the markers of a life well lived. And the irony? When you live from that place, the external begins to align naturally, not because you forced it, but because you stopped chasing someone else's idea of who you should be. Modern life teaches you to worship productivity. Be useful. Be efficient. Keep moving, keep climbing. But cannabis, in its sacred form, disrupts that programming. It slows you down. It softens the edges. It says, wait, feel this, notice this, ask why. In those moments, time bends, and suddenly you see clearly. That meeting you were stressing about? It doesn't matter. That argument you couldn't let go of? Irrelevant. What matters is truth, presence, purpose, not as a buzzword, but as a lived experience. Here's what they don't want you to realize. A society built on control and consumption needs you to stay numb. It needs you disconnected from your intuition, chasing the next thing, never questioning why. Because the moment you start asking the real questions, the system begins to crack. You can't be controlled by fear if you're no longer afraid to feel. You can't be manipulated by status symbols if you no longer need them to feel worthy. And you can't be sold solutions when you remember you were never broken. So, what does success look like now? Maybe it's not the 6-figure income or the 5-year plan. Maybe it's waking up and feeling peaceful in your own skin. Maybe it's having the courage to walk away from what drains you. Maybe it's choosing art over approval, presence over productivity, silence over noise. Maybe it's sitting with the plant not to escape, but to listen, to ask what's next, and actually hear the answer. This is the shift that changes everything. When you stop using cannabis to cope with a life you secretly resent and start using it to design a life you actually want. When it becomes less about altering your state and more about understanding it. When it becomes a ritual, not a routine. A portal, not a pattern. And from that place, clarity returns, not the fleeting kind you get after a hit, but the kind that lingers, the kind that reorients your compass, the kind that helps you remember. Because this isn't just about weed. It's about waking up, about breaking out of the mechanical life you were conditioned to live and returning to the life you were meant to live, one of meaning, one of intention, one of sovereignty, because this is bigger than one video. It's a movement, a reclamation, a remembering. And it begins when you stop chasing highs and start living highly. When you stop following someone else's idea of success and build your own definition, rooted in truth, in spirit, in you. That's the real activation. That's the path home. You're not here by chance. Deep within, there's a quiet knowing, a spark that's always whispered, there's more to this plant, more to this life, more to you. That flicker of intuition in silent moments, that unshakable sense your potential stretches far beyond. What you've been shown, it's not just a feeling, it's a memory. A soul-deep echo of who you were before the world drowned it out. You're waking up now, peeling back the layers, uncovering truths one revelation at a time. And cannabis, a plant once wielded to dim your light, is emerging as a sacred tool to reclaim it. Cannabis isn't the path itself, but when approached with reverence, it transforms into a companion, a catalyst, a compass. Used not to numb but to feel, not to escape, but to awaken, it shifts from mere recreation to something revolutionary. In a world that thrives on your disconnection, keeping you distracted, fragmented, chasing fleeting highs, the most radical act is to connect. To dive deep, unapologetically, into yourself and then into the world around you. This is where true change ignites, not in external systems or fleeting trends, but in the sacred revolution of inner alignment. But this isn't just a concept to ponder. Transformation isn't intellectual. It's visceral, embodied, lived. So what does that look like in practice? It begins with crafting your own ritual, not a script to follow, but a practice that resonates with your soul. Light a candle, set a clear intention. Silence the distractions, no phones, no screens, just presence. Breathe deeper than usual, letting each inhale ground you. Each exhale release what no longer serves. Speak your truth aloud, even if it's just a whisper to the universe. When you invite the plant into this space, let it amplify your awareness, not overshadow it. You don't need much. In fact, less is more. The power lies not in how often you consume, but in why. Over time, you'll see the real high was never the fleeting euphoria. It's the clarity that lingers, the insights that take root, the truth that persists long after the smoke fades. This is the afterglow of alignment, a grounded power that declares, I know who I am. I remember why I'm here. I don't need to escape anymore because I've come home. Imagine what happens when millions embrace cannabis this way, not as a distraction, but as a guide. Not to dodge pain, but to transmute it. Picture a generation rediscovering that this plant was once a bridge to the divine, not a crutch, but a torch lighting the way to higher consciousness. The world would shift. Systems built on control media campaigns, cultural programming lose their grip when individuals awaken to their own power. A human being fully alive, fully aware, is an unstoppable force, untethered from the illusions that once bound them. This isn't about getting high. It's about getting free. It's about reclaiming a sacred tool that's been misunderstood, stripped of its depth, and sold as a shallow escape. The ancients knew its power. Sadhus in India used it to still the mind. Egyptian priests burned it to commune with wisdom's divine source. Modern science now echoes their wisdom. Cannabis enhances blood flow to the brain's regions of self-reflection, mirrors meditative states, and sparks the same neural frequencies as monks in deep bliss. This is no coincidence. It's a rediscovery of what was always known. But the key is intention. Without it, cannabis can cloud rather than clarify, numbing you instead of igniting your spirit. With reverence, it opens a door to truths you've always carried but forgot to claim. So pause before you light up. Ask yourself, what am I seeking? Am I ready to face what rises? Create space for the answers through breath, silence, or movement, and let the plant guide you deeper. This is the revolution. Not louder, not faster, but truer. A single intentional moment with cannabis can unlock more than years of mindless use. When you choose this path, you're not just consuming, you're communing. You're not escaping, you're arriving. And as you awaken, you'll inspire others to do the same. Share the ritual. Plant the seed. Because a world of awakened souls, connected to their truth, is a world no system can control. This is your invitation to step into the sacred, to remember who you are, and to let cannabis be the compass that guides you home. What did you think about today's video? Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If this video opened your mind or helped you see reality in a new light, don't forget to like and subscribe to Top Hidden Knowledge so you never miss our next deep dive into mystery, perception, and the hidden workings of our universe. And if you have time, Explore more videos at our channel. We're just getting started. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and never stop questioning the world around you.